And thank you, to Peter and to Susan in the Fine Art Department here at SVA for inviting me to share my work with you all. I also want to thank my family and friends. More than my work, I wouldn't be standing in front of you without the direct support of my peers. Lastly, I want to thank my ancestors for being here today. Um, Being here is a full circle moment in a lot of ways. So again, thank you for having me as your guest and for making the time to come out tonight this evening. Like teaching, giving these talks is not only energizing, but they hold me accountable in a lot of ways, and they often leave with more questions than I came with. The most important ones being, what am I actually doing? And what is my practice really as of today? Um, Before I start, I want to kind of share a quote by James Baldwin from Giovanni's Room. And it's a quote that I reflect on often as I move through my studio every day. And I want to have it hold some space with us here tonight. So the quote is this: people are too various to be treated lightly. I'm too various to be trusted. So I was born in Washington Heights in New York City, which is the northern or the second northernmost neighborhood, right below Inwood, and right off the George Washington Bridge when you enter from New Jersey. The hospital that I was born in sits on the same land as the New York Yankees' first ball field, back when they were known as the New York Highlanders. And it's the hospital where Hajj Shabazz, also known as Malcolm X, was pronounced dead, and directly across the street from the Audubon Ballroom, where he was assassinated. And a quick story about my mom and the Audubon Ballroom. She arrived in New York City from the Dominican Republic in around 1963, 1962. And she told me once, after about a year, and at this point she's like 17 years old, she started to go to movies on her own. And she found that the Audubon Ballroom was the only theater that she could find that, would occasionally play Spanish-speaking movies or movies dubbed in Spanish. These screenings started to become popular, so she would start to arrive earlier and earlier, just to make sure that she would get a seat. And at one point, she was invited to join the meetings that would occupy the space in the theater space prior to the screenings. So she would be outside waiting alone for the movie. And although she didn't speak any English at the time, she was listening to Malcolm X speak every other week for at least a year before he was assassinated in that very room. For the first 14 years of my life, the building was abandoned. And before my mom's or Malcolm X's history with the building, it was originally a vaudeville theater and a movie house built in 1912 by William Fox, who later founded Fox Film Corporation. All that to say, so in terms of why and how I understand myself as an artist, the ability for an object or a space to contain this type of layered history that seldom speaks to each other was paramount to everything. And now I would say that my practice, or things have gotten a little bit more complicated, and my practice is motivated by a variety of different circumstances outside of history and how they overlap. But in the beginning, this is how I learned to make meaning, how you start to learn to understand how things could have an aura, things could have a past and a present and a future in a lot of ways. Speaking presently, I would say that my goal with having a creative life is to provide a platform for these various narratives and stories that I'm constantly engaging with I'm talking about all the stories, so silly ones, playful ones, and the dark ones, and the triggering ones, to have a real direct dialogue with one another, and a real connection. Not only so they interact, but also to give them an opportunity to cross-pollinate in a way that generates stories with new paths or flexible futures. Any questions so far? I love being interrupted. So if you want to interrupt me and ask a question while I'm talking, or to clarify something, I'm happy to do so. It's much more exciting that way. So I'm just going to roll through images. Everything is dated and titled. It's somewhat chronological. It's all post-undergrad, and that occupies around 17 years of work. So this isn't all I've made in 17 years, but it's a lot of it. It's about 172 images. And again, I'm just going to scroll through it. If you want to stop at any point to talk about anything in particular, I'm happy to. Sometimes the images are going to align with what I'm saying, but mostly they do not. So again, please interrupt with a question if you have one. So when I was younger, again, my parents, my beautiful parents. When I was younger, I would say the most important thing was for me to kind of decolonize my past from white canonical structures and detach myself from the traumas that inform my anxieties and my insecurities. Painting and drawing gave me that liberation. The goal being to finally discover who I really am and move forward with who I want to be. And and I'm Dominican, so like most history is connected to the intense violence of European colonialism Dominican and Dominican American history are not very documented. But I will say that there's a lot of work being done by scholars such as Lucina Abreu, Jensen Ortiz, and Pedro Regalado in collecting, indexing, and archiving the spectrum of histories of the Dominican diaspora. Let's talk about this guy. So, led by Rafael Lorena Trujillo, the Dominican Republic also saw a 31-year dictatorship that enforced the genocide of Haitians and Black Dominicans by the thousands. It was a dictatorship that designed campaigns to literally whiten the country, and it instilled the fear and shame of African ancestry and Blackness that's still very present today, both politically and culturally. And this is the legacy that I'm contending with. Not only as an artist making objects, but as someone who's also navigating a Dominican identity, Dominican American identity, and American identity, Afro-Caribbean identity, and my own Blackness. So, again, I'm just going to scroll through, so if you want to stop at any image and talk about it, I'm happy to do so. So I would say that I produce work that offers viewers a chance to reflect on hope, loss, and memory, primarily. Through painting, drawing, and sculpture and installation, I create dialogues between these human experiences through stories based both in reality and fiction. I like telling stories. I love telling stories. And even though the work has a direct relationship to myth building and straight up lying, to be honest, like most fiction, I'm after some very real truths that can inform my life and help me understand the trajectory that's pushing me along. I used to lie a lot as a kid, and I'm kind of going off script a little bit. And I feel like art was the first time that I felt like the lie had a place, and the lie had kind of like a comfortable place and more of a playful place. And I think that in lying, as a kid, I wasn't trying to be manipulated. I wasn't trying to be trying to get anything over anybody. I just was interested in like fantasy. I was interested in building worlds, and I was interested in possibilities of things that weren't actually present. And yeah, so I feel like painting offers me that space. It offers me a space to kind of think about the stories that I want to see happen. It's a space where I also can kind of...
Wait, can you talk about that last one?
Sorry?
It's like cool.
This one? Okay. So this is a great example of what I'm talking about. So this painting is called The Water by My House. And I wanted to make an homage to the river as if it was like a living being. So I grew up on 172nd Street between Broadway and Washington, which is about 2 blocks from the Hudson River on the west side of like northern, Washington Heights. And the river was like a very kind of present force, but as a New Yorker, you don't have access to waterways in the way that other places do. So I like to spend time by the river alone a lot when I was a kid. I would cut class and go to the river, I would cut class and go to the Met, but mostly into the Hudson River because nobody's looking for anybody there. And it was also a lot of like encampments for homeless people around that space, especially by like under the George Washington Bridge area. So yeah, I wanted to make a painting that kind of paid homage to that space because it felt like a neglected space, and a lot of the work also deals with this idea of thinking about New York as this very populated, very kind of claustrophobic space that you overlook kind of trace in a lot of ways. So for me, I like looking at neglected space and thinking about how I can kind of make it, humanize it possibly. So thinking about the river as a person is something I was really interested in, not painting. Any other questions? So lying. So I feel like the stories I tell, I would say they're urgent, they're sad, they're sometimes confrontational. My process for inventing narrative often involves a really rigorous and intense painful kind of mode of reflection. And making art has always been the safest space for me to grieve. While my art practice will always prioritize the pursuit of joy, silliness, and play, working in my studio has also been the most honest place for me to confront and speak to loss directly. I also believe in beauty. And it's becoming clearer and clearer as I get older that my practice has always been about this pursuit of beauty in one form or another. But things evolve, and I would say like through my evolving relationship to things like fear, love, death, intimacy, violence, power, aloneness, my work addresses again themes of Dominican American identity, regional loyalty, and when I say that, I'm talking about like my loyalty to New York, for instance, my loyalty to the Yankees. It's this kind of unspoken thing that I have to kind of align with being a New Yorker, especially being from uptown. But my practice offers me the space to kind of test those loyalties and to really push the integrity of what it is that I'm feeling loyal to. Yeah.
I'm really interested in how you project with colors.
In my color palette.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because there was one piece a few slides back
Mhm.
that stood out a lot to me.
Tell me when.
The other one, go back. One more. It's a few slides back. Sorry.
Is that?
Yeah. No, like the last that one.
Okay.
That one I really liked.
Okay.
Why did you choose these colors?
Why did I choose those colors? So a good question, and it kind of links with what I'm talking about now. So this idea of really understanding that the work is coming from a particular space, like geographically. I use a lot of pink in my work, and a lot of the pink is referring to like institutional color from like the 70s and 80s. So thinking about classrooms, thinking about hallways and hospitals or other kinds of like government institutions are always painted with this like seafoam color or this like pukey Pepto pink. So for me, it's kind of a callback to that. And this painting in particular like was a challenge with me and a friend at the time. We're gonna make large scale paintings in 15 minutes. Whoever can finish it first is like cool. So this painting happened really fast, and I had to kind of like make very quick decisions. And like the palette is one of the most limited palette paintings I've ever made. But yeah, so I kind of had to go to my go-tos, which is like the pinks. So yeah, I mean, I would say like if I had a goal with what I want my work to do, as I wanted to communicate like an undeniable experience. That makes sense. Like I don't want to create anything that's exempt from critique, but my goal is to cause an unquestionable sublime moment for the viewer in as raw a way as possible without spectacle or grandiosity. Like I want it to feel like you're looking at something and not a painting necessarily. Like it's an object. It has texture. It has weight. It has a touch to it. Like it's something that I touched. And I mean, I'm guilty of touching paintings in museums. I think that means it's a good painting. So I want the viewer to want to touch it. I want the viewer to want to come close and smell it. Because again, it isn't an image, it's a thing. And one of the hardest things about teaching right now is that a lot of students are really connected to the image, really connected to this idea of experiencing the work through a flat screen, which is their phone. So I can't say this enough, go to museums, go to shows, see things in person. I don't see things as often as I would like, but as a student, that should be your priority. That's where you learn the most. It's like, stealing from other artists and looking at how they do things physically and in person. There's a lot of this that you can't see as far as the texture and like the actual volume of the work because it's in a flat image. So I think I take pride in my paintings photographing poorly because they should. You should be able to see it better in person. And really quick about this, so this is like these three paintings that I have up right now. Again, I steal a lot from artists. So if you look in the corner here, it's like that little bubble right there. So I stole that from a Stuart Davis painting. I think it's called Jefferson Street Market, or Jefferson Street Station, or Franklin Street Station. It's a painting that I saw a couple years ago at the Met that was part of the Thomas Hart Benton installation. And I feel like stealing from paintings is something that for me connects me to a larger legacy of painting, to a larger history of painting. I'm pointing to artists that I want to align with, and artists that I've learned from ultimately. This painting, it should be obvious, I stole it from Luncheon in the Grass. I call it Luncheon in the Grass. And the idea is that, I love baseball, I grew up loving baseball. I never played as a kid. My dad was like very, he almost got drafted to play for the Giants when he was younger. And he couldn't due to political reasons with the dictator. And he only left the country when the dictator was assassinated. So when I got to Yale, I founded the first school of our softball team. I don't think they played since, maybe. And we were not a good team. We lost 35 to 2 against the medical school in our first game. But after that game, I felt so good to play an organized team, to have this cohort, to have this squad, that all I wanted to do was take off my clothes and spend time on the field alone. So this painting is an homage to that moment. And then this painting, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Gladiators by Philip Guston. It's a small little painting at the MoMA that's very, kind of like more like the earlier stage of Philip Guston's work. And that staircase in the corner, I stole from that painting, and then I just built the rest of the painting off of that. So I think it's really important as an artist to kind of, think about the lineages that you want to be a part of. For me, I had to kind of create the constellation of artists that I feel like I'm in line with. So that's what the paintings also do. They point to those moments. And not all of the artists that I'm thinking about or image makers that I'm thinking about are necessarily fine artists that you're going to see in museums. A lot of the images that inspired me growing up are signage from Washington Heights, thinking about the storefronts, thinking about the fonts of the letters that are used in these storefronts, thinking about commercial like graphic painting in Dominican Republic, which you can find something like Bugs Bunny combined with like a Michael Jordan combined with like a Power Ranger selling ice cream, And that kind of juxtaposition is really interesting to me because it's about like kind of this really fun, witty way of thinking about appropriation and thinking about how can we capitalize on an image that already exists in the world and reframing it for our own purposes. And I think as a painter, like you're not going to paint anything new. Like everything has been painted, So I think like finding ways to kind of recycle things and reintroduce them to a world is really important for me in my practice. Any questions? Cool. Let's see what's up here.
Do you ever find yourself referencing things like pop culture, like you mentioned VR? I've noticed that too, like mixing the kind
I mean, I do, but then I get really like self-conscious about it. Like, I think that there's a nostalgia to the work that for me feels very comfortable, like pointing to the past or pointing to like a recent past. So I don't know, like putting something that looks like closer to like a newer way, like newer sensibility of like advertising and graphic design for me like feels like very disconnected to my work. But that said, I should explore it because it is an uncomfortable point for me. So, but yeah, I deal with old stuff. I collect a lot of things. I collect comic books. I collect kind of detritus from my everyday. So like for instance, the glass that's creating the shadow for the sculpture is beer that I drank in grad school with friends in my studio. So it all comes from those bottles. And these are things that I collect and save. So like there's already kind of this like pointing backwards in my practice that doesn't really allow me to use anything too contemporary as far as material or graphic material. So I can go back to the script a little bit. So the two-dimensional works, you're gonna see throughout the slides, like I embed a lot of like numbers, symbols, letters, disembodied figures in like, kind of compositions that seem unhinged. And, for me, those are like very spontaneous moments. So it's kind of like note-taking. So if you see like a number or letter, like it kind of feels like it has this profound meaning, like it symbolizes something or someone. But sometimes it's just me kind of reminding myself of something in that moment, and it just becomes a formal element in the painting moving forward.
Yeah, good take it.
I really like humor. I like being silly. Again, I think that, being silly and being playful is kind of a quicker access to like real truth in a lot of ways. And I think that there's something about comedy and about like the relationship with comedy and an audience and the involuntary sense of like creating laughter for somebody is something that I'm trying to go for in the painting. I'm trying to create this like kind of instant relationship with the viewer where it's like, okay, I kind of have you trapped in the painting and now what are we gonna do? So it's kind of this like a chance to really connect in a way where you're helping somebody wander a little bit. And I can talk a little bit about like how I start the painting.
That's up.
So painting is really scary, and painting has always been scary. It's always going to be scary. Before I start painting, I don't necessarily have a plan. I might have an idea for a mark, for a line, for a shape, or for like maybe two colors that I want to use. But it's never about like, oh, I'm going to make this painting. These two guys are like doing a handshake. There's like smoke coming out of their fingers. So it's really about finding the image. And a quick little anecdote about my other life as a musician. So I'm also a drummer. I also produce music. And when I was studying drumming, and my teacher was trying to help me understand how to solo, he would explain to me that they're like musicians who have an instrument that requires breath have to think about timing and cadence in a different way than the drummer, for instance, or a guitar player or a piano player. So you can, so as a drummer, like there's a chance we can fill every second with a note, right? But a flute player can't do that. So he would have me, whenever I had to breathe in, I would have to stop playing drums and then continue when I'm actually able to breathe. So I bring that to painting, and for me, it's really about like the spontaneous kind of relationship with the surface and like kind of moving along and scuffling along until I start to recognize something. And then after a while, if I see something that looks like a foot, then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna build a figure around this. But it really is spontaneous, and it really is kind of like finding the image. I would say more often in the past, my paintings and drawings would become more sculptural. And from an early age, I was really curious about the past lives of objects. And as a result, I developed a practice of collecting things. And over time, bits of these collections would become collage elements in my paintings and supports for my drawings. And when I say support, I mean I'd be drawing on this on blank paper that I've been collecting since high school, essentially. And in using reclaimed material, I'm interested in how the energies, identities contained by certain objects can come together to create new narratives that are impossible to predict. And these objects have an aura. And it's an aura that's been nurtured before my encounter with them. And that way I'm channeling energies and accessing ancestors, to be honest. Touching something that has been touched to then further extend its meaning, purpose, and legacy is the alchemy that makes art a spiritual practice for me. So I can talk about a little bit about installations, which I don't have any images of installations, but it connects to kind of what I'm talking about. So I build installations, and what I would do is I would construct freestanding walls, corners, and that mirror fragments of my childhood home. And within these spaces, I place materials from the various collections that I have in arrangements that are meant to function similarly to Haitian Deve drawings or like Navajo sand painting, both which are done on the ground and are meant to unlock portals to spirit and ancestral realms. While I almost exclusively make drawings on reclaimed paper, in a way, I would say that my painting practice has become more traditional materially, but it's only because I truly believe that I'm making objects and not images. And yeah, I can teach about. So when I first got to SVA, I got to two colleges before that. I was at BMCC and I was at Brooklyn College. And I was pretty set on being a drawer. Like for me, painting was elitist. I didn't see myself reflected in painting. I didn't believe, it's like hockey. It's like you have to afford to do it. If you can't afford to do it, you can't really do it well. At least that's what I thought in my mind. And for me, drawing was very accessible. It was like the people's medium in a lot of ways, where all you need is a pencil and a surface. All you need is like your finger and wet cement, You could draw anywhere with anything. And then I had class with Peter Christoph. And he made me fall in love with painting and Jack Whitten. So I feel like Jack Whitten and Peter are like my godparents of painting. They helped me understand that it's a larger practice, that it's something that that requires a spiritual and an emotional connection. And Peter, thinking about how you always begin with this idea of love and beauty. So that was really powerful for me. And I wasn't getting that from drawing. Drawing felt more immediate. It felt more aggressive, grittier. But painting had a touch. Painting had a sensitivity. You have to pay attention. You have to listen to the painting. And Peter taught me that. And I would say Jack, kind of almost on the other side of that kind of spectrum, taught me how to think about it as a scientist or an alchemist. And thinking about how there's a plasticity to painting. Like painting is not only paint is not only something to create images with. It's not an image making device. It actually has a weight. It's a substance. It's sculptural. It has a volume to it, and it can have meaning embedded in the actual material. So thinking about when I was starting to get into painting at this point, I would think about, okay, so how does paint appear in my life? How does paint surround me outside of art? Like, what is paint and what is painting? So I started thinking about the apartment that I grew up in and the walls, and thinking about, I don't know if anybody's been in an old year apartment that hasn't been renovated, but the paint is thick. And there's like stuff in there that you can't see anymore, but there's like chunks of things that like, who knows what they are. But that became really interesting to me because it's about, it's a time capsule. It's telling a story. Again, it's like a history, historical document in a lot of ways. So when I was a kid, I was fascinated with like chipping away at the paint and just looking at the colors and understanding that my sister and my brother had the room pink or blue ones, and I could see that. I could physically hold it. And that's what painting became for me. It became like a historical document that really is about tracing people through a space and tracing an existence through a space. Yeah. And I would also say that my sensibility regarding storytelling and materiality is a great deal to my personal experiences with Santeria, Ifa, and Dominican voodoo, in which objects and images serve as evidence of and access points to parallel space-time that are not readily visible. For me, every object speaks to reality that is not present. In treating my work as evidence rather than a collection of art things, they become objects of homage and proofs of stories that have never been told. And I'm fascinated again by the idea that humans will always be able to tell new stories, even though we keep going in circles with a lot of things. You know? Any questions? Thoughts? So I like to kind of, before we go into the Q&A, keep scrolling. I always like sharing notes for my studio. So these are notes these are not edited. These are things that I kind of write down as I reflect when I either enter my studio or leave my studio. And these are them. Here we go. So first note, I suspect that I may be manipulating my viewer. Second note, it really is a trick every time. I spend a considerable amount of time being afraid that I can't finish a painting, or more accurately, that I can't find what it needs to be. I'm essentially waiting for the painting to reciprocate some kind of attention, perhaps the attention that I'm giving it. Next note. I understand a painting to be complete when I've created something that I can actually continue working on infinitely, where there's nothing I can do to ruin the painting. These are some questions that I ask myself. What if I can't find the painting? What happens when I do? What does it mean for me to paint or be a painter? Am I a painter? Am I a Dominican painter? Am I an American painter? Am I American? What does it mean for me to wield abstraction? Am I being divisive when it comes to abstraction? Am I using it too formally? Does it carry enough meaning? Does abstraction compromise or enhance my relationship to representation? As I ask these questions, I'm already defining abstraction as a supporting agent in my painting, but is it? Is the gesture representation the work actually the structure for abstraction to exist? Why don't I think of it in reverse? Am I actually more familiar with abstraction than I am with representation? Has familiarity tricked me into thinking that I understand representational image more than something less definable in our visible world? Is it unfair to represent things that aren't readily visible? How do you paint frequencies? How do you paint energy? How do you paint love? Is it unfair to bring invisible things to light? Is it fair to know what cell structures look like? Does science curb curiosity in non-scientists? Is science to be trusted? Is art to be trusted? What does it mean for me to engage with the surface? What does it mean for me to deal with touch or deal with being touched? What does it mean for me to deal with love? What weight does love hold in painting? What does it mean to desire to be seen and for being seen to be the highest gesture of appreciation? What does love mean for me and how does it inform our practice? Is painting love? Is love generous? Is painting generous? And that's it. So, any questions?
I wanted to know your connection on like Santeria, because I'm not Santera by any means, but I'm Cuban American, and I know people in my family that practice Santeria, so I wanted to know like, what is that to you? Who like in your family? Like, I'd like to know more.
Sure. I mean, I'm Dominican, and it's not commonly a Dominican thing. I entered into music. So, I was studying at the Harvard Conservatory for Performing Arts for about 4 years, which is in the same building as the Museo del Barrio. And there, as I was learning, Afro-Caribbean and Afro-Puerto Rican and Afro-Cuban music, not necessarily Dominican yet, just the music is so connected to the faith that it just brought me to the faith in a way that was really organic. My mother and my family practiced like more of the Dominican side of things. But yeah, I was initiated, I want to say 2000, like right before SBA, so 2003. And I've been practicing ever since as a musician. And I recently reconnected with the faith. But it's my community of like santeros and people in Ifa are the musicians for the most part. So yeah, I answered it through music.
Can you explain to us what Santeria is?
Sure. So Santeria and Ifa are like Afro Caribbean faiths that came over with the slave trade essentially. And Santeria refers to like I don't even know how to say it in English, but it's like it's the practice of like worshiping saints. And what the enslaved people had to do when they were here to cover up their traditional African faiths was swap out the orishas and their deities with Catholic saints. So that's how that kind of came about. And the gonga also comes from that same sensibility. So gonga is actually just a whiskey barrel repurposed as a drum. So what happens, they would make drums out of things that were just around them. And when, they had private time, essentially, they would just like convert everything to instruments. So it's a very kind of resourceful way of salvaging a tradition and culture. And now it's like we don't have to hide anymore, but there's still the stigma. There's still like family members that I won't wear my beads around because I don't want to have a conversation with them. But yeah, so it's a Afro-Caribbean faith. Yeah, that's primarily practiced in Cuba. Comes from like West Africa, Nigeria.
More questions?
Do you still draw? Like would it like you draw on the paintings, but you still do draw?
Serious drawings. I do still draw. That's a good question. So I draw a lot. I draw almost every day, I would say. But I only recently had a show of drawings like 2 years ago for the first time in a long time. For me, like I don't think of audience when I'm drawing. For me, drawing is like me. It's about what I want to see, what I want to do with these papers that I've been collecting for a long time. And I rarely show them. Like for me, like I'm more interested in kind of like having an audience relationship with the paintings because there's I don't know. There's something about the drawings that I feel like they're all mine. Like I don't want to sell them. I don't want to like share them. They're not for viewing unless they're like people that I know, people that are more intimate relationships. But yeah, I still draw a lot. Yeah.
How do you deal with the relationship between the DR and Haiti and the incredible this difference in wealth and poverty and between those two inhabitants of the same island?
Yeah, I mean, how do I deal with it?
In your work?
I mean, I would say again. So like a lot of my like faith community and my musician community are also like Haitians, so we collaborate a lot. But I think like in my visual work, like it's there because, and I feel like maybe it's not readily accessible as far as like a vocabulary people are going to pick up on, like, oh, this part is Haitian or this part is this. But I feel like it's in the work. But also, I think, growing up, there was this very like anti-Haitian sentiment, even in my house growing up. So one of the things that I did actually starting like 2 years ago was I started learning Haitian Creole as a way, one, to like show solidarity, but also to kind of like start to think about, the community that we're sharing the island with, essentially. So it's more in my day-to-day than it actually appears in my visual work. But yeah, there's a lot of, I try to kind of like, participate and collaborate with, a lot of musicians.
I mean, it is this divided nation,
Mm-hmm.
divided by colonial decisions and there's a lot of pain and suffering.
Yeah,
And
a lot of resentment. There's so much like bad energy there that it's been hard to, I mean, I think more politically than anything, it's been hard to kind of feel like there's going to be some kind of like resolve. It just keeps heightening and keeps kind of blowing up. you know. And Dominicans aren't doing the best job of fostering that relationship. So they're really guilty in a lot of ways.
Can you talk a little bit more about like memory, how you use like your own memories and other people's memories?
Yeah, can you repeat that?
Sure.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit more about memory, how you use memories, whether it's like yours or other people or your neighbor or whatever?
Sure. I mean, I wouldn't say I like use other people's memories. That's tricky because I feel like one thing I really have to be careful. Huh?
Do you? I guess.
I mean, it's a good point. So I do and I don't. I think that, so there's one time where I did an interview and I talked about this kind of spiritual thing my sister would do. And she read the article. She was really upset. And I think, and I understood. I think that there's things that are my stories to share. There's things that are my family stories to share. And giving her that space to express herself first was really important. That was a hard lesson. That said, I do still believe that there's space for me to kind of articulate it as coming from me and not being like, oh, my sister does this, So it's something I'm very careful with, kind of making sure that like it's like I and not like I'm speaking for like somebody else or a collective. And memory works in a lot of ways. Like the main part I would say is my palette. Like the colors that I choose are usually colors that I'm trying to reflect and remember from childhood or from, I don't know, like a boxed candy. Like the other day I was trying to figure out like the green of Alexander the Great box. And so it's really about reflecting and trying to figure out like how can I connect the memory to like something physical as far as color in the palette. And also, again, thinking about the paper that I draw, I'm really trying to think about like this thing as having a memory that I'm potentially extracting and unpacking and kind of unraveling a little bit. And yeah, working on paper that I buy from the store, like it's really hard. I have to kind of like distress it or something, or put it through some kind of history for me to feel like it's something I would like to use.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the presentation, and there were quite a number of paintings that I really liked, I have to say, which is whatever. But I saw the ghost of Matisse every now and then. Is that someone that you've looked at? Because in terms of the picture plane, I kept seeing he'd come and go. I'm not saying that you were copying him or anything, but as a compositional system, it seemed to me that Matisse was floating in and out compositionally in terms of picture plane and it being all sort of forward. Is that true, or is that just something that I imagined?
It's interesting. I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm referring to him directly. He is something to think about. Like I think that between him and Gustin are two painters that I feel like looked a lot at their paintings more than they actually worked on their paintings. And I do that too. Like I feel like spending 8 hours just looking at my paintings in the studio is still work, And I think that maybe, yeah, there's things that like I feel like both Matisse and Philip Gustin do, and Martin Hartley, and people like R.B. Katai, who are like, they're painting nerds. And I feel like I want somebody to catch the littlest thing that I'm doing, like, oh, Kitty did this with the brush, And I feel like Matisse does that. So I feel like I'm also trying to kind of like flex in that way, in the way that they do. And I also think like there's paintings that, I'm thinking about a lot, like The Red Room. It's a painting I think about constantly. Yes.
That's the one I kept seeing. Yes. And I like the way you transposed it, synthesized it. I mean, it's not a critique. It's like just a referent, and then you did your own thing with it. But I saw that, The Red Room, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think like, with The Red Room and also an artist like Moreau, like there's like these floating things that happen that are just kind of like, again, unhinged or disconnected from like the main composition, but somehow like feel anchored and grounded and like solid. And that's something that I feel like I appreciate from Matisse, especially with how like light the paintings feel, but like how heavy they end up kind of actually being.
So you mentioned earlier on how you're really interested in like the narrative
when you're creating work, you'd also said that you start with kind of like a mark and move from there. So is it important for you, for the viewer, to kind of understand the narrative that maybe you're thinking of when you're creating a piece? Or is it kind of something that you don't have that intent for them to understand the same narrative and you're more so just kind of like propagating, I guess, like creativity through like your culture and your ancestry and whatnot?
I mean, I think I am saying something with each piece, you know? Whether the viewer gets that or not is not up to me. Like, I'm not in control of people's, you know, education or histories with images. But I think that I wouldn't say that, like, it's okay that people can translate it however they want. Like, I'm not interested in, like, the open interpretation part of things. I am kind of, like, pointing at something with each work. And, you know, I think that if there's 2 people that can get it, I'm successful. You know, if like my mother can see it and recognize it, then that's great. You know, I've had critiques at Yale where like everything goes over everyone's head, and then I bring it home and my mother's like, "Oh, this is about this." I'm like, "Here you go." It's good. So it really is about like almost like a sincerity and connecting with like you know, the dialogue between me and the painting and letting that be kind of the relationship and not, you know, requiring like it to be understood in that sense. So
Yeah.
I guess to phrase this question properly, it's in creation, as as artists we create things. What makes you trying to phrase it properly. Why must you create, not why do you create? And if it's a must, how so?
It's always a must for me. I feel like there's painting is not a leisurely activity for me. It's not what I do to relax. It's the opposite almost. It's what I do when I need to get something out. I feel like those moments where I have this kind of like consistent, you know, couple of months or weeks feeling good, that's suspect to me. Like I like the idea of being comfortable and safe, but I also don't like the idea of being complacent and satisfied too easily. So for me, making art is always about what I'm trying to learn, what I'm trying to investigate, what I'm trying to explore, and how I can do that in a way that keeps me engaged. Like, I'm the first audience member for my work. So if I'm bored, then it's a wrap, you know? So for me, there's always that urgency of like, how can I like make myself more interested? How can I keep myself engaged? And how can I like trick myself into seeing this for the first time again? And that's always going to be rebuilding a new relationship to making art each time. So yeah, for me, it's the pursuit of like, it's like you're only as good as your last bat, you know. So you're always trying to be better with the next one. And it's really about like feeling challenged and feeling like I'm working, you know, and not like I'm just like making. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Giovanni's Room is one of my favorite books ever, and it is a really complicated depiction of identity, like the self, which I think your work relates to. Like, can you talk a little bit about that relationship?
Sure. I mean, I think that like for me, the work is a chance to kind of lead into that, like, you know, that variousness, and that what I said at the beginning is thinking about like, I'm never one thing. I'm always I'm always kind of navigating simultaneous identities, moods, energies, and then being okay with that. You know, I think the greatest example that a lot of people use are thinking about Tupac and Dear Mama versus I Get Around. You know, like both can exist. Like one doesn't cancel the other thing out. So I think like, again, this idea of being silly, of being vulnerable, being brave, all at the same time in one thing, for me is what it's about. It's like letting all those things exist and click together in front of a viewer, as opposed to kind of refining myself to then present something. I want to show the confusion. I want to show the mess, essentially. So yeah.
I just have a question about how you see the relationship between historical reference and abstraction functioning in your work, and if you feel like abstraction tends to make reference illegible or harder to discern in your work, or whether if you see those things in tension at all, or you see them somehow working together. If that makes sense.
Yeah. It's a hard question. I mean, I ask myself this all the time. I think that Marilyn Minter. My first final review at the school was with David Chow and Marilyn Minter. And I made a painting for the first time. And I made a painting that was very kind of like abstract, very brushy. And she's like, you're faking it. She's like, you're so good at drawing that you're faking abstraction. And that traumatized me. So it made me think of abstraction as this thing that, because I'm, technically, I can do things well, that I can pretend for something to look abstract or casual. And even Peter, I brought something into your class once, and I did this like drip painting, and then I traced it with a Sharpie, each strip, and you're like, this is so self-conscious. And I was like, it is. So I think there's always that, like, I love images, I love drawing, and I love articulating things. So I have to be very careful with like using abstract gestures or moments in abstraction that I'm then gonna like illustrate with like my hand, So I have made abstract paintings, and they're things that I hate in the moment, but like 10 years down the line, those are my favorite paintings. Because I'm kind of like letting the material speak to the gesture and not like the information that I'm trying to like depict. But I think that I always make this joke, it's like there was no audience in the world, I would just make abstract paintings. I would just make like, I don't know, like color field paintings. I would love to do that. I think that there's something very kind of spiritual about, painting that way that could be very sincere, But I think like I also like drawing houses and feet and people and things like that. So it's hard.
No, I was waiting. Sorry.
Yeah. So he's in the drawing. That's him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Looks just like it. But a smaller version.
Do some installation shots to get a sense of the scale and stuff.
I guess my question would be, how do you feel like you get to a place where you're creating authentically, especially like having grown up in New York and being Dominican, have like a similar experience. You go to schools like SBA and Yale, and like I'm not saying like I don't feel understood or represented, but like how do you get to a point where you feel like you're expressing yourself, but not trying to make it digestible?
Painting outside of school. Painting outside of school and spending time in like your own studio, like without the voices, like, and kind of testing what it is that you feel like you're interested in. I think that while I was in school, you're in this, I mean, I'm not speaking for you, but I'm saying in my experience, like, it was always this kind of sense of impressing each other, which is great for a school setting, but I think like once you leave school and once you don't have that support system, it's like, what are you gonna do then? And that's when you start to see the things you're actually interested in. And when I graduated from SBA and Yale, like each time, I had to kind of take inventory of a lot of things, and it started to reduce the things that I was kind of like using, the tropes that I was dealing with. I really reduced the materiality of the work as a way to kind of purge a little bit to see what I wanted to invite back. But I think it's a matter of painting outside of a program. Is once you start to like recognize yourself like in that isolation.
What pushed you to do art for so many years?
I mean, it's the thing I've been doing the longest. I've been doing since kindergarten, like it's the thing I can, I've always been interested in. I've always, like, even in elementary school or, like, in kindergarten, like, I remember we all went to the circus. We all came back to the classroom. I had to draw clowns. And I was, like, drawing my clown. I was so into it. and we all had to hang them up, and I couldn't find it. And I felt so embarrassed that I spent so much time in this thing that I couldn't recognize. So since then, I've been very intentional about the way I draw. So I've always had this kind of energy of drawing well and like knowing that this is going to be seen. You know, I've always had that sensibility before I thought of myself as an artist. I've always drawn. I've always been into comic books. I've been into animation growing up. But I always drew. It was just the thing I did. I grew up in a family. We were 5 of us in the house, and everybody had their space. My siblings had their own rooms, and I was kind of like in the bottom bunk of my brother's room. So all I did was draw. Like, it's something that I'm just like, it's second nature to me. So it wasn't until I got to SBA that I realized that like I wanted to do it professionally. When I got here, I was actually 1 week in illustration, and Tom Woodruff asked me to come into the office, and he was like, "What are you doing here?" I was like, "You're right." So I went to the registrar's office to switch to fine art. But even back then, I was thinking like, how do I like make a living? I didn't understand galleries. I didn't understand museums. And once again studying with Peter, Suzanne, like Jack Whitten, Michael Goldberg, all these great people who introduced me to like all you need to do is paint. All you need to do is be by yourself in like your dungeon studio and work. And that felt like a dream. I feel like I could just like do that. So yeah, I'm essentially, I feel like doing what I'm doing since kindergarten. So yeah.
So I'm gonna be a senior next year, and I see a lot of similarities between the two of us. I'm also Hispanic. You use a lot of imagery that I really enjoy, and you also like you put some like little Spanish stuff in there too that I feel like not everybody might catch on. I like that. But I want to know, after you left SVA, what did you do? Like, because I'm worried and I want to know. You know, what was your experience after you left?
I mean, so I used to work as a doorman on 21st and 2nd Avenue for like 7 years. And when I graduated from SVA, I quit that job. And I started art handling. And for me, it's like, how can I continue in education? How can I keep learning and be around like the spaces I want to be in? So, sharing studios with other people, but in terms of making money, art handling was like the primary focus. And eventually I landed a job as Werner as a custodian because the last art handling job I had before that, I was carrying a Henry Darger and I dropped it. And I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And eventually as Werner, like they phased me into being an art handler, and I was like, no, I don't want to do this. So I went to grad school. But art handling is a good way to get money because it's like, you can do it as a freelancer. You're not locked into a schedule. You can still have time to work. One of the best pieces of advice that Jack Whitten gave me was get a 5-day-a-week job. Then within a year, make sure it's 4 days. Within 6 months, make sure it's 3 days. Within like 5 months, make sure it's 2 days. And always replace a work day with a studio day. So like, I think the best thing to focus on is how can you figure out to maintain a studio space, even if that's at home. Like always have a studio. For better or for worse, like I always had a studio. I didn't always have a place to live. I didn't always have like, food necessarily, but I had paint and I had brushes. And it was a huge sacrifice, but yeah, it's important to keep working. Yeah. But yeah, art handling jobs are great.
So you were talking about we should go to the galleries to see the texture about the paintings, but actually most of us are looking from the screen. So I want to ask, how do you think the AI generation will affect fine art?
I think it already is. I think it's like, I think that anything that makes you, how do I put this? I feel like artists are the best people to go to as far as understanding how something is. Like they're the people who are going to reintroduce you to something you already know. AI is going to do that, I guess, in a way, but I think having something that's made with hands is always going to be different. Like there's no, I don't think artists are going to be replaced. I don't think, like artists are needed for those images to be created anyway. So once people start making paintings, is AI going to refer to itself? What's going to happen then? So I think like, a lot more, I guess, dangerous things have like been an obstacle for painting and like art making, and AI is just another thing. Like photography didn't kill painting, and that's what it was supposed to do essentially in a lot of ways. But so AI is just another new technology that should transform into something else on its own, and it'll eventually do that. But I don't think it's gonna replace or take the place of painting in any way or art making. Yeah.
Do you intend to like show the later part of your PowerPoint, but in this way, like quickly showing them and answering our questions, or do you like not intending to show them to us?
No, I mean, I brought these images to show. Like, I think that for me, like, I don't necessarily like giving a lecture with like 12 images and that's it. I'd rather kind of like show an overview of what I'm working on and like talk about my ideas, and then you can kind of like calibrate that to the things you're looking at. But yeah, so like I didn't think I would run through all these images, but I'm almost done with them. So yeah.
I think that's I like that way of presentation.
Oh, thank you. All right, well, thank you.